Welcome to Conversations at the Crossroads, the podcast where spirituality meets the beautiful, messy experience of being a human. I'm Jenny, a witch, tarot reader, hairstylist, mentor, and the voice behind Conversations at the Crossroads. Each week, we gather here at the Crossroads to explore spirituality, personal growth, and the tools that help us navigate the ever-evolving human journey. Some conversations will dive into the mystical, others into the practical, and sometimes we'll sit together with the hard stuff. Along the way, we may explore ideas that challenge us and stories that shift our perspective, or practices that help us walk our path with a little more intention. So wherever you're listening from, take a breath, settle in, and join me at the crossroads. It's just like light inside. White, iridescent. Like a magical light. What do you feel deep down inside you're supposed to do with that light? Welcome back to Conversations at the Crossroads. What you just heard was a clip from a session I had today, and what this episode is about. It's a little different because I'm sharing my personal experience that I had this morning with past life regression hypnotherapy with Marcelina Hardy of Intuitive Clarity Hypnosis. Marcelina's work centers on hypnosis, spiritual exploration, and past life regression. And after my session, I knew I wanted to sit down and talk about what came up and what it felt like and what I think this kind of work can open up inside of us. This isn't going to be me trying to prove anything, or it's not about convincing anyone that every image or impression in a hypnotic state is a literal fact. It's about exploring the experience honestly and what I saw, what I felt, what resonated, and what kind of work can be powerful, whether you view it as soul memory or as subconscious symbolism, or maybe something in between. So, if you've ever been curious about past lives, hypnosis, spiritual healing, or the stories your soul might be carrying, settle in. We're going to the crossroads between memory and mystery. For me, I want to frame past life regression less as something that needs to be proven and more as a tool for self-reflection. Whether someone believes they're accessing literal past lives or stories that are symbolic that come from somewhere deep in your subconscious or just symbolic imagery, the experience can be meaningful still because it gives you something to sit with, something to interpret, and something to learn from. What stood out to me is that this kind of work can act like a mirror. It can reflect back patterns or emotions or fears. It can reflect your gifts and relationship dynamics in a way that helps you look at your present life a little differently. Not necessarily because every detail has to be factual, but because the experience can open a door to reflection and intuition and a little bit of deeper self-understanding. I'm not sharing this as medical advice. I'm sharing it as a spiritual and reflective practice that may help some people connect dots within themselves, ask better questions, and get curious about the stories that they may be carrying inside. Some benefits of hypnosis can be greater self-awareness and pattern recognition. It can be reflection on relationships and reoccurring themes in life. It can give you a stronger sense of meaning, purpose, or spiritual connection. And it can help you access inner imagery that invites journaling or contemplation or integration afterwards. I booked a session from a place of real curiosity. I've been increasingly interested in past life work. But even more than that, I've been interested in exploring different tools that might help me go deeper into my spiritual self. I think so many of us have gifts and instincts and intuitive ways of knowing that get buried under societal conditioning. We're taught not to trust ourselves, not to listen too closely to our intuition, and to let the logical, protective ego mind run the whole show. So, part of what drew me to this was the desire to explore what might be happening underneath all of that. I wanted a chance to connect more deeply with my spiritual gifts and see whether this kind of work could help me soften some of those internal walls and access parts of myself that don't always come through in everyday life. This wasn't my first experience with Marcy. I attended a group event of Marcy's at the Holistic Treehouse, which is a place that I have mentioned before that I also teach classes and host workshops. And when I first attended, one of the biggest things I noticed was how familiar the experience felt. As someone who meditates a lot, I realized that the hypnotic state felt very similar to just being in a deep meditation. That was really reassuring because before that, I had been nervous that maybe I'm not able to be hypnotized at all. I can be really present in my mind, I can be guarded, kind of controlled with my emotions and my thought patterns. So part of me wondered if I would be too walled up for it to work. But I was pleasantly surprised by how naturally I slipped into it. And that made me feel like this might really be a tool worth exploring more deeply. And so when I got to Marcelina's office for our one on one session, the space itself immediately helped me soften. It felt really calming. Dark lighting, a smooth, relaxing energy, a big, comfy chair, and a blanket. It definitely felt like a space designed for letting your guard down and going inward. At the beginning of the session, we spent some time talking about my intentions and what I was hoping to receive from this experience. I had actually forgotten that I wanted to pull cards from my tarot deck beforehand to help narrow down what I wanted to focus on. And when I mentioned that, Marcy said, "Oh, well, I have decks here." And she showed me two different oracle card decks and a tarot card deck. So we chose an oracle deck and I pulled a few cards, which ended up feeling like a really grounding and intuitive way to shape my intention before we went any deeper. The cards that I drew, interestingly enough, were your eternal spirit, which is the high self and sacred intuition. I drew prophets and ancient seers, which it looks like a witch looking into a cauldron with light coming out of it, which is interesting about some of the things that came up later. But it represents decisions and predictive guidance. And I pulled out a card of kinship, which is community and your group, which is where I do a lot of work and where I feel very called to do a lot of work. Once I got settled into the chair, she began guiding me slowly into meditation and then deeper into hypnosis. I was a little nervous because I have this tendency in deep meditation to do what's called quote unquote click out, where you're not really asleep exactly, but you lose track of things that happen in the middle or only really remember the beginning part. And then suddenly you remember or realize you're being brought out of meditation. So I was aware that might happen, and I could feel myself starting to drift away. But she seemed to notice too, and she gently brought me up just enough to keep me engaged because the purpose here wasn't for me to be so out of focus that I didn't know what was going on. The point was for me to be there and be an active participant in what was happening and to remember. I I wanted to remember, she wanted me to remember. It works best if you can remember and reflect back later. And she seemed to notice and gently brought me back to help keep me engaged. And then she asked me what I could see. And at first, it was just this sense of vast openness. And I let the first image come into focus. She told me to imagine holding a light and seeing if that light shined on anything in particular and anything came up. When things came into focus, I found myself in what looked like an old attic or like a dusty room in an old house. There were boxes and sheet covered objects, and there was a dim, shadowy feeling like a space of forgotten things. As I explored the room, I noticed a wooden crate. She asked whether there was something nearby I could use to open it, and I found a crowbar. And when I pried the crate open, inside was this bright, iridescent light. And I picked it up and held it in my hands. And when I did, everything shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't in that dusty, forgotten room anymore. I was outside in a field, and in the distance, there was like a huge tree with deep roots spreading out from it. And I walked towards it. And when she asked what I felt I was supposed to do there, the answer that came up was sit and wait. So I sat against the tree, still holding the light. Then I had this feeling I needed to place it within myself, like absorb it. So I did. I put it basically into my chest, like it was absorbing into my heart chakra area. And that felt like a turning point, like something was being returned to me or awakened in me before I moved into the next part of the experience. What struck me about the beginning is that it didn't feel random. It did feel deeply symbolic. That dusty attic felt like a place of forgotten things, hidden things, maybe even parts of myself that had been stored away. And the light inside the crate felt like something precious that had always been there, waiting to be uncovered and consciously claimed. Then the tree, the roots, the placing the light into my chest felt almost like a grounding or an initiation. Less like I was being given something new and more like I was remembering or reabsorbing something that already belonged to me. So then we kind of let the field fade away and drop in and fade into the first scene. This is where I first found myself in a scene that felt like a past life scene. I found myself inside what felt like a wooden building, like a tavern. And I could see the people there drinking and caring about, not really recognizing me or seeing me. And even though nobody was paying attention to me, I felt really nervous. In my body, I felt anxious. I was waiting for someone and getting more and more uneasy because they should be here by now. They were late. And there was this underlying sense that something really important was about to happen. As Marcy guided me to look toward the door, eventually a man came in, and almost immediately I knew he was there to help me plan an escape. I started getting impressions of horses and the middle of the night and a hurried getaway. What made me laugh a little bit later was it even felt like those horses were stolen, which is funny because I joke all the time in this life that I have a lot of car trouble because I must have been a horse thief in the past life. So when that detail surfaced, I definitely had a little chuckle. As I stayed with the scene and she asked more questions, I realized that this man was connected to me in a deeper way, that he was the brother of my late husband. And I also became aware that I had a little boy. He wasn't there in the first tavern scene, but I understood that I would be leaving and escaping with him, with me. So the tension in that moment wasn't just fear for myself. It was fear and urgency of a mother trying to get out with her child. From that scene, she guided me up and then back down into a new one. This time, I was standing hidden behind some trees near a graveyard. And I had the little boy with me. In front of us, there was a funeral happening. I could see the man from the tavern, who I believe was my husband's brother, among the people gathered there. And I had this deep sense that I was not supposed to be there and that I needed to stay hidden. But I also felt like I just needed to see this for myself. The little boy was confused about why we couldn't go closer. And that detail hit me emotionally because it carried this feeling of trying to protect a child while also carrying something heavy and unspoken myself. We stayed back and watched, and then I had this clear feeling that we needed to leave. That it was like I had seen what I came to see, and staying any longer was going to be too dangerous, and it was time to go. That's where the story gets especially powerful because the emotional truth is bigger than the literal details. The core themes here feel like hidden grief, survival, protecting a child, and having to witness loss from the margins rather than being allowed to stand openly inside it. What stood out to me in those scenes was not just the imagery, but the emotional tone, that emotional residue that came with it. There was this deep sense of secrecy and urgency and protective instinct. And the funeral scene really especially felt so heavy because it held that tension of grief and distance at the same time, wanting to witness something important, but not being allowed to fully step into the open. It made me think about how sometimes we carry patterns of hypervigilance and guarding or emotional self protection in this life without knowing where they come from. Whether that scene was a literal past life or a symbolic story my inner world needed to show me, it felt meaningful. And from there, the story kept unfolding. What began to emerge wasn't just a moment of escape, but like a larger emotional world around who I was, what I was carrying, and what I may have been trying to survive. After the funeral scene, the next thing I came into was what felt like a market square. And in front of me were gallows. And all I could see, and trigger warning, this is a little graphic, all I could see were three women hanging there, their feet dirty, swinging from the ropes. And I remember feeling immediate terror and horror and disgust. And it was one of the strongest emotional surges of the entire session. The feeling was things are bad. I am going to be found out. I need to get out of here before this happens to me too. From there, the next scene shifted again, and I was standing outside of a large house with the little boy in tow. We went inside, and the only people I really noticed were workers or servants. And when Marcy asked me what I was meant to do there, the word that came through was mending. It felt like this was a place where I was supposed to blend in and stay hidden and survive. Almost like I had been sent there to disappear into an ordinary role and begin again quietly. Working for the house, mending clothes, pretending that my life before didn't exist. Then she guided me to the last day of that lifetime. I saw myself on a dock, surrounded by men, with my hands tied. I knew they were going to throw me in the water to see whether I would float. Like the old witch trials, where the accusation itself was already kind of the sentence. I don't remember the physical death itself, but I knew what was about to happen, and I understood that this was the end of that life. But here was the most powerful part that came. Marcy asked what message my soul would give me if I could step out of that body and speak directly to me now. And the message, in its simplest form, was the truth doesn't always matter, which I know feels pessimistic at best. But it came with a much bigger message that was more than that sentence. It felt like the deeper meaning was that people will often believe what they want to believe. They'll project what they want to project and interpret you through the lens of their own fear and their own bias or misunderstanding. So the lesson was not that the truth is meaningless, but that I still have to know my own truth, even when other people misread it. I still have to live in alignment with what I know, even if that does not protect me from other people's stories about me. After that, she guided me upward again, almost like into the clouds, and invited me to see whether a guide would come through. I didn't see a clear person or figure, but I did feel a presence for sure. And they did give me a message. And the message there was about trust and patience and timing. Trusting myself and letting time unfold, allowing my natural abilities to come online as they're meant to, and trusting that it's safe to access who I really am. There was also a deeper layer to that because when she told me to ask my guide whether I would be safe in this lifetime around that issue, what came to mind immediately was a maybe, which of course we all wanted to hear the answer was yes, right? But it's more complex than that. Immediately, the face of the current president popped in my head and the headlines about Pete Hegseth's holy war and Christian nationalism. And that for me, that connects to the larger reality that there are harmful people in this world and that vulnerability is not always without risk. So the message still felt clear. It is worth the risk to walk in your purpose, to do the work that you're here to do, and to be visible in your gifts, because hiding out of fear ultimately serves less than showing up in truth and in community anyways. What landed for me was not just the imagery of persecution, but the pattern underneath it. The fear of being seen, the instinct to hide, the pressure to blend in, the awareness that sometimes people decide who you are before you ever get a chance to speak for yourself. And whether this was literal past life or symbolic story my inner world needed to bring forward, it touched something real in me. It made me think about how many of us mute our intuition, soften our power, or stay smaller because somewhere deep down we have learned that being fully seen can come with danger. But the message I took from it was not to stay hidden. It was actually the opposite. It was yes, the world can be harsh. Yes, people may misunderstand you. And yes, there is still value in living your truth, trusting your gifts, and doing the work you came here to do anyway. And the deeper comfort was this. Even if some part of my soul has known persecution before, I'm still here. I'm still drawn to that work. I'm still passionate about spiritual growth and truth and service and community and becoming more of who I really am. Whatever happened in that lifetime, it didn't extinguish that part of me. If anything, it made it feel like that thread is so deeply woven into the fabric of who I am that it keeps returning. It keeps finding me. It keeps asking to be lived. And that was incredibly reassuring because it reminded me that my path is stronger than my fear. So for me, the takeaway from this experience was not that the path is guaranteed to be safe. It was that it's still worth walking. Maybe that's part of spiritual remembrance, recognizing that the soul keeps leaning toward what it came here to do, even after fear, even after loss, even after being told to stay hidden. I also came away feeling less interested in proving whether every image was objectively real and more interested in what was undeniably true in the feeling of it. The fear felt real, the message felt real, the reassurance felt real. And whether those scenes were literal memories, symbolic stories, or something in between, they gave me a lot to reflect on about visibility and intuition and purpose. If you have ever felt afraid to fully be yourself, afraid to trust your gifts, afraid to be misunderstood, or afraid of what visibility might cost, I think that is part of what this experience touched for me. It reminded me that fear may always be part of the landscape, but it does not have to become the thing that decides my life. And maybe that's the gift of reflection work like this. Not certainty, but courage. Not full proof, but giving ourselves permission. Not an escape from the world, but a deeper relationship with who you are inside of it. I want to leave you with a few journal prompts or reflection reminders just in case this stirred something up in you too. The first question is, what fears come up when I think about being fully seen in my gifts, voice, or spiritual path? What truth do I know about myself, even if other people misunderstand it? If I believed that my path was stronger than my fear, what would I do next? And what does it mean for me to live my truth, even without any guarantees? Thank you for sitting with me today at the crossroads and having this conversation. Take what resonates and leave what doesn't, and let yourself stay curious. Sometimes the most meaningful answers don't come as facts. Sometimes they come as symbols or sensations or memories and truths that we can feel before we know how to explain them. If you'd like to connect with me more, you can find me at Hex and Hair on Instagram and TikTok and even Facebook. Or you can find my website, www.hexandhair.com. And you can find the wonderful Marcelina Hardy at Intuitive Clarity Hypnosis on Instagram. Her website is intuitiveclarityhypnosis.com. She's a past life regression hypnotist. She offers coaching. She helps with healing and helping you to align yourself to your soul's true path. Go follow her. Go check her out. Go ask her questions. She is amazing, and I guarantee you'll learn a lot from her. Well, I hope you be kind to yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Stay curious with yourself. And I look forward to seeing you again on the crossroads. Bye!